in the form of flower portraits, and then they gradually begin to exert a more general influence on other forms of art, such as fabrics, carpets, ivories, hard stoneworks, and also glass pieces like this one. Here, there's a slightly stiffer appearance to the design than in 17th century works, which leads us to believe that the decoration is a little later and tends more towards the 18th century. Another feature that helps us to determine the date of this object is its bell shape. This shape appeared first in metalwork, and bell-shaped metal objects didn't appear until the mid-18th century.
Curator Gwenaëlle Félinger.
This sandstone door is an example of a stone screen, an architectural feature designed to allow refreshing breezes through at the same time as preserving the shade inside a building. It also allowed people inside to see out without being seen. This type of feature is known as a mashrabia in the Arabic world, whereas the term jali is used in India. We know of similar examples in wood, but the stone versions are the most impressive. And what's even more impressive is that these screens are often made from pink sandstone, which is an extremely delicate stone that's very difficult to work and has been appreciated in India since the second half of the 16th century. The stone has been cut in such a way so as the perforations are slightly beveled. In other words, they're wider in the central part of the stone than at the edges, creating a play of light and shadows that moves at the same time as the viewer.
Now take a look at the decoration of the two halves of the door, which are each divided into 3 parts.
The decoration is exclusively made up of geometric motifs, the only variation being in scale. In the lower part, we see a network of circles enclosing hexagons, which in turn contain stars. In the central section, we see the same principle, but on a smaller scale and without the hexagons. And finally, in the upper part, we have just a network of diagonal and vertical lines forming small squares. So the geometric design becomes simpler the closer we get to the top.
Curator Gwenaëlle Félinger.
This large ivory casket is fitted with 2 hinges and another metal fitting. It's made up of several different ivory panels. Its vast size is what makes it truly exceptional. The entirely sculpted decoration is organized like a piece of architecture, with flower motifs arranged between columns. The shape of these small columns is reminiscent of Indian architecture, and in fact is very characteristic of India in the 17th century. They're known as cypress columns because of a similarity to the shape of a cypress tree. On the lid of the casket, however, the decoration is slightly different, and the architectural style disappears. The central space is taken up by a large medallion, and in the corners there are 4 quarter medallion corner pieces. This decoration is similar to a design often found on book bindings. Then on the sloping sections of the lid, we find a second type of decoration made up of flowers inside medallions, which this time is closer to the type of decoration found in the margins of manuscripts or the pages of an album.
Albums developed in India from the 17th century. They were made up of paintings that were originally separate works, but were brought together in an album by a collector. The centre of these paintings would be taken up by the main scene, surrounded by a margin, generally composed of floral decoration, similar to the decoration you can see on this casket.
The casket dates from the Mughal period, which began in the 16th century in India, and ended with the British conquest in the mid-19th century. This was a period of expansion for India, and an extremely important era for the development of the arts, especially ivory work.
Scientific researcher Delphine Miroudot.
The rim of this jade cup is embellished with cartouches containing inscriptions, whilst the walls are adorned with a floral decoration combining lotus flowers and stylized leaves. All the decoration is engraved, and if you look very closely, you can make out the presence of minute traces of gold, which suggests that originally the piece was also highlighted with gold. The object was carved from jade, a material that regained its status in Iran and Central Asia under the Timurid dynasty founded by the great conqueror Timur Lenk, better known as Tamerlane. Jade is a semi-precious stone with talismanic and protective properties. It symbolized power in China. And in the period in question, jade took on a dynastic significance. In the first quarter of the 15th century, Tamerlane's grandson, Ulugh Beg, had a cenotaph for his grandfather carved in jade. The monument was adorned with an inscription of great historical importance, announcing a prestigious ancestor of the Timurid dynasty, the great Mongol conqueror Genghis Khan.
This cup, which dates from the second half of the 15th century, became part of King Louis XIV's gemstone collection between 1684 and 1701. This monumental bronze object is a torch stand, which originally stood over 80 centimetres, which is more than 30 inches high. But here you can only see the circular upper section that held the oil and the middle section. The lower part, which formed the base, is part of the collections at the Hermitage Museum in the Russian city of St. Petersburg. The torch stand dates from the very late 14th century, from the 1390s, and was commissioned by Timur Lenk, who's better known in the West as Tamerlane. Scientific researcher Delphine Miroudot.
Alors, qui est Tamerlan? C'est le fondateur
So,
de la dynastie
who was
des
Tamerlane?
Timurides.
He was the founder of the Timurid dynasty that reigned over Iran, Iraq and Central Asia from 1370 to 1506. He was a great conqueror with a bloody reputation who conducted raids as far afield as Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, Russia and India. Commissioning this object was an act of piety on his part. It was made for the funerary complex of the holy man Ahmed Yasavi, a mystic saint of Islam who died in 1166. Yasavi is thought to have been responsible for the Islamization of the Turkic peoples of these regions of Central Asia. Timur made a pilgrimage to his tomb in 1396 and immediately gave orders for the existing monument to be restored. He also commissioned 6 great torch stands, including the example you're looking at here. 4 others remain in situ.
The mausoleum of Ahmed Yasavi is located in the modern-day city of Turkestan in Kazakhstan.
Annabelle Collinet, design engineer.
Dans cette vitrine, vous pouvez observer
The objects in this cabinet are mainly bowls and candle holders made in the Fars region of Iran. This piece, one of the very few examples to have survived, is quite exceptional. First of all, because of its monumental size compared with the other objects here, and then because of its very unusual shape. It is a box that is faceted. In other words, the corners are cut off. The lid is also faceted. On top of that is a dome reminiscent of Iranian-style domed mausoleums or tombs. The body of the box is decorated with a frieze of inscriptions in oblong cartouches or panels. Between each of these are medallions or roundels. They depict horsemen galloping to the left, in the same direction of the inscriptions which read from right to left. The same iconography appears on the lid. The inscriptions are salutations in Arabic. No name is given, so we don't know who this remarkable object was made for. In the late 1960s, researchers were able to identify what we still call the Fars school from the content and wording of the inscriptions and the salutations in them.
This school produced gold and silver inlaid metal objects around the town of Shiraz in the first half of the 14th century. The Louvre has many examples of its work, which you can see in this same cabinet near the mausoleum-shaped box.
Scientific researcher Delphine Miroudot.
Vous avez sous les yeux un plat en
This ceramic dish has been glazed, which means that it's covered by a thin glass-like layer on top of which decoration has been applied and then fired several times, since not all the colours can withstand the same temperature. The decoration is arranged in concentric circles. Moving from the outside to the inside, we first find pseudo-inscriptions, in other words, inscriptions that have no meaning, then lotus petals, and then genuine inscriptions, all of which highlights the bottom of the dish, which is decorated with a delightful circular pattern of fish against a background of scrolling plant motifs. The main sections of the design are outlined in gold, giving the piece a particularly precious appearance.
The predominant colour of the dish almost perfectly imitates the subtle green colour of celadon ware, a type of Chinese porcelain. In the Middle East in the 14th century, this was the type of porcelain most frequently imported, and so this piece illustrates the influence of Chinese ceramics in the Islamic world.
The lotus petals decorating what's termed the cavetto, the section between the bottom of the dish and the rim, are reminiscent of certain types of dish found in Chinese celadon ware, which feature moulded lotus petals in the same position. The fish in relief in the centre of the piece is also a reinterpretation of Chinese ceramics, in which a pair of fish symbolise fortune. However, the decorative technique and the circle of fish, as well as the presence of inscriptions and pseudo